Picture this. You're 5 months pregnant, standing in a $50,000 wedding dress, about to marry the billionaire of your dreams in front of 500 Manhattan elite. Then, through a baby monitor app on your phone, you accidentally hear your fiancé discussing the fertility drugs he's been secretly putting in your morning smoothies. But that's just the beginning. In the next hour, you'll witness Madison Pierce discover that every single person in her life, her ex-boyfriend, her future mother-in-law, even the donor who fathered her child, was placed there as part of a 30-year genetic experiment that killed her father. What would you do if you found out your entire life was orchestrated by someone who saw you as nothing more than a breeding vessel? Would you walk down that aisle? Would you sign those papers? Or would you burn it all down in front of everyone? This isn't just another revenge story. This is about a woman who weaponized her own wedding livestream, triggered an FBI raid at her reception, and discovered her unborn baby was genetically engineered with DNA from 3 different sources, including her dead father. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand why 20 million people watched Madison's wedding in real time, and why her story changed medical ethics laws in 90 countries. Madison Pierce stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the St. Regis penthouse suite, her wedding dress casting ethereal shadows across Italian marble. 500 guests waited 20 floors below. The cream of Manhattan society gathered to witness what gossip columnists called the wedding of the decade. At 32, Madison had built her event planning empire from nothing after her parents died in a car accident 7 years ago. Today should have been her crowning achievement. Marrying Alexander Whitmore, tech billionaire and the man who had swept her off her feet with promises of forever. Her hand drifted to her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement from the life growing inside. 5 months along, the pregnancy had been unexpected, but welcomed with joy. Alexander had seemed thrilled, immediately upgrading her engagement ring and moving up the wedding date. "I want our child born into a proper family," he'd said, his blue eyes sparkling with what she thought was love. The baby monitor app on her phone chimed softly. Madison smiled, thinking of the nursery they'd been setting up in Alexander's penthouse. She'd been testing the equipment all week, making sure everything worked perfectly. As she reached for her phone to check the notification, she noticed the app had somehow connected to an active feed. Strange, the monitor should have been off. Then she heard Alexander's voice, crystal clear through her phone speaker. "The pills are working perfectly, Mother. I started adding them to her morning smoothies just last week, exactly as you instructed." Madison's blood turned to ice. She fumbled with the phone, nearly dropping it as she increased the volume. Lena Whitmore's cultured voice responded with satisfaction. "Good. The fertility enhancement drugs from my lab need at least 10 days to ensure proper genetic expression. We can't have my grandchild being anything less than perfect." "Madison doesn't suspect anything?" Elena continued. "Nothing. She thinks the smoothies are just my way of ensuring she gets proper nutrition. She drinks them religiously every morning." Madison's knees buckled. She gripped the vanity table, her reflection showing a face drained of color. The happy bride had vanished, replaced by a woman discovering her fairy tale was built on lies. The conversation continued through the monitor, each word another dagger. "Victoria's getting impatient," Alexander said with a laugh that Madison had once found charming. "She knows about our arrangement but doesn't understand why I can't just divorce Madison after the baby's born." "Because divorce means sharing assets," Elena replied sharply. "The medical provisions in the trust documents Madison will sign today give us complete control if she becomes mentally unstable. Much cleaner than divorce. Victoria can wait another year." The phone slipped from Madison's trembling fingers, clattering on the marble floor. Her wedding day, the culmination of 2 years of romance, was nothing but an elaborate trap. The door burst open and Victoria Sterling stumbled in, clearly drunk despite it being barely noon. The corporate lawyer who'd handled all of Alexander's contracts, who'd always been so professional, now looked disheveled in her burgundy bridesmaid dress. "Oh, thank God, Jennifer," Victoria slurred, mistaking Madison's cousin who'd just entered behind her for someone else. "I need to tell someone or I'll explode." She fumbled with her phone, accidentally hitting speaker as she played a voicemail meant for her assistant. Her own voice, recorded earlier, filled the room with damning clarity. "Contracts airtight. Once she signs the trust amendment at the altar, Alexander will present it as a romantic gesture, updating beneficiaries for the baby. Elena controls everything. Medical decisions, finances, even custody, if Madison becomes quote-unquote incapacitated. The language is buried in subclauses, but it's bulletproof. That event planner won't know what hit her until it's too late. 3 signatures and she's basically Elena's property. Madison's cousin gasped. Victoria's eyes finally focused, recognizing her mistake. The blood drained from her face as she realized Madison had heard everything. Madison, But Madison was already moving, her mind racing despite the shock. She grabbed her phone from the floor, fingers flying across the screen. FBI Special Agent Sarah Mitchell was in her contacts, a client who'd become a friend after Madison planned her daughter's Sweet 16. The text was brief but urgent. Wedding live stream, 3 p.m. Watch carefully. Emergency. Sarah's response came within seconds. Already here. Received your package 2 weeks ago. We're investigating. Play along. Help coming. 2 weeks ago, Madison remembered the nagging feeling she'd had, the small inconsistencies in Alexander's stories, the way Elena always seemed to be watching her. She'd sent Sarah copies of some strange documents she'd found, never imagining they were part of something this sinister. Thank God for intuition. Victoria had fled, presumably to warn Alexander. Madison had minutes, maybe less, before they came for her. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The designer dress, the perfect makeup, the fairy tale princess, all of it was costume for a tragedy she hadn't known she was starring in. But Madison Pierce was no victim. She'd survived her parents' death, built a business from nothing, and now she would survive this too. For her baby, for herself, and for the truth that deserved to be heard. The door to the bridal suite opened again, this time revealing Elena Whitmore herself. At 65, Elena commanded attention with her silver hair and calculating eyes. She smiled, but it never reached those cold blue depths. Madison, darling, you look absolutely radiant. Though Victoria mentioned you seemed upset, Madison forced her breathing to remain steady. Just pre-wedding nerves. Elena glided closer, her Chanel suit impeccable. Of course, it's natural to feel overwhelmed. Such a big day. So many important documents to sign. Documents? The trust amendments, dear, for the baby's future. Alexander didn't mention you'll sign them during the ceremony? Very romantic, he thought, making everything official as you become family. Madison's phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. 6 agents in place as guests. Keep her talking. I'd like to review them first, Madison said carefully. Elena's smile turned predatory. Oh, but you already have, darling. Last month, remember? During that tedious insurance update meeting, the medical power of attorney, you signed it along with a dozen other papers. Such a responsible mother-to-be, ensuring your child's health care was protected. The memory hit Madison like a physical blow. She had signed papers, trusting Alexander's explanation that they were routine insurance forms. The language had been so dense, so technical. She'd been tired from morning sickness, distracted by wedding planning. That was just insurance, Madison protested. Insurance, yes, and a medical proxy, and a few other provisions. All perfectly legal. All giving me, as the baby's grandmother and a medical professional, certain rights should you become incapacitated. Mental health issues are so common postpartum, aren't they? Madison's hand went protectively to her belly. You're threatening me. Threatening? Darling, I'm protecting my grandchild. You see, Alexander may not have been entirely honest about our family situation. But then again, neither were you about yours. Before Madison could respond, Elena produced a tablet, swiping through documents. Your parents' accident 7 years ago. Such a tragedy. But did you know your father had been investigating Whitmore Pharmaceuticals? He'd discovered irregularities in our clinical trials. His death was very, convenient. Madison's world tilted. You're saying, I'm saying nothing. Accidents happen. But if you were to become unstable, making wild accusations, well, that would be unfortunate for everyone, especially your baby. A knock interrupted them. Jack Morrison stood in the doorway, and Madison's heart sank further. Her ex-fiancé, the investigative journalist who'd broken her heart 3 years ago, was the last person she expected or wanted to see. "Sorry to interrupt," Jack said, his dark eyes finding Madison's. "Alexander asked me to check on the bride." Elena's expression brightened. "Perfect timing. Madison was just having a moment of nerves. Perhaps you could calm her, given your history." She swept out, leaving them alone. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "You're working for him," Madison said flatly. Jack closed the door, his face etched with pain. "Madison, I need to tell you something. Yes, Alexander hired me. 2 years ago, before we even met. He wanted information about your father's investigation." Each word was a new wound. Their entire relationship, the coffee shop meetings, the long walks in Central Park, the proposal she'd accepted before he mysteriously left, all of it had been a lie. "But I need you to know," Jack continued urgently, "I fell in love with you for real. That's why I left. I couldn't keep lying to you. I couldn't be part of his plan anymore." His plan, Madison's voice was hollow. Jack pulled out his phone, showing her email threads. He orchestrated everything. Our meeting, our relationship, even our breakup. He wanted you vulnerable, alone, ready to fall for a fairy tale rescue. And then he swooped in, the perfect prince. Madison read the emails, each one revealing another layer of manipulation. Alexander had studied her like a specimen, learned her dreams, her fears, her weaknesses. He'd known exactly how to make her fall in love. "There's more," Jack said quietly. "The baby." Alexander's voice cut through the room. "Discussing ancient history?" He stood in the doorway, resplendent in his custom tuxedo, looking every inch the billionaire groom. His smile was warm, loving, completely false. "Jack was just leaving," Alexander said smoothly. "Weren't you, old friend?" Jack looked at Madison one last time, his eyes full of regret, then left without another word. Alexander closed the door and turned to his bride, his mask finally dropping. "You know," he said conversationally, "you really should have drunk more of those smoothies. The fertility drugs would have made this so much easier." "You admitted it," Madison breathed. "Admitted what? That I gave my pregnant fiancé prenatal vitamins? That I care about our baby's health? You're sounding paranoid, darling." "Pregnancy hormones, perhaps?" He moved closer, and Madison instinctively backed away. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk down that aisle, smile for the cameras, and sign every document I present. Because if you don't, if you make a scene, everyone will see the hysterical pregnant woman who had a breakdown at her own wedding. Mother already has a psychiatric team on standby." "The FBI knows," Madison said desperately. Alexander laughed. "The FBI? Based on what exactly? Your paranoid delusions? Some mistimed text to your friend Sarah? She's downstairs enjoying champagne, by the way. We made sure she got the good stuff. Very relaxing. She won't be checking her phone for hours." Madison's last hope crumbled. She was trapped, surrounded by enemies, with her baby's life in the balance. But as Alexander reached for her arm, she made a decision. If she was going down, she wouldn't go quietly. The processional music floated up from the ballroom as Madison stood frozen in Alexander's grip. 200 feet below, 500 guests waited in their designer clothes and inherited jewels, ready to witness what they believed was a love story. "5 minutes," Alexander said, checking his Patek Philippe. "Then we walked down together, the loving couple who couldn't wait another moment." Madison's phone, hidden in the folds of her dress, vibrated against her hip. She'd silenced it, but could feel the insistent buzzing. Someone was trying to reach her. "I need a moment," she said. "The baby, I feel sick." Alexander's concern looked almost genuine. "Morning sickness?" "Something like that." He loosened his grip slightly, and she pulled away, moving toward the bathroom. 2 minutes, he warned, "then I'm coming in after you." Madison locked the bathroom door and pulled out her phone. 15 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. Then a text. "This is Agent Diana Woods, Sarah's partner. Sarah's been drugged. We're moving in but need confirmation. Can you get Alexander to admit anything on the wedding live stream? It goes live in 3 minutes." The wedding live stream. Of course. Alexander had insisted on it, wanting to broadcast his perfect wedding to the world. The entire ceremony would be captured on multiple cameras, displayed on massive screens throughout the ballroom, and streamed to thousands of viewers online. Madison typed back quickly, "He won't admit anything on camera. He's too smart." "Then we need another way. Do you have access to the AV system?" She thought quickly. The AV booth was just down the hall. She'd been there yesterday reviewing the technical setup with her team. Her team, people she'd trained who trusted her. "Madison!" Alexander's voice carried through the door. "Time's up." She flushed the toilet for show and opened the door, her phone hidden again. "I'm ready." But as they walked toward the elevator that would take them to the ballroom, Madison caught sight of the AV booth. Inside, she could see Tom, her technical director, making final adjustments. "I need to check one thing," she said, pulling toward the booth. "The ceremony starts in 1 minute, please. It's my wedding too." Something in her voice must have convinced him. Or perhaps he was so confident in his control that he didn't see her as a threat. He released her arm. Madison burst into the booth. Tom looked up, startled. "Madison? You should be—" "Tom, I need you to trust me. Cue up the baby monitor app footage from my phone. Set it to override the main screens during the vows." Tom's eyes widened. "That would broadcast to everyone. The guests, the online stream." "I know, please. My life depends on it." She thrust her phone at him, the app still recording Alexander and Elena's conversation from earlier. Tom, who'd worked with her for 5 years, who'd seen her build her business with integrity and grace, took the phone without another question. "When?" he asked simply. "During the ring exchange, when everyone's watching." Alexander appeared in the doorway. "Technical difficulties?" "Just making sure everything's perfect," Madison said, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. As they rode the elevator down, Madison felt the walls closing in. Each floor that passed was another step toward either freedom or doom. The doors opened to reveal the ballroom in all its orchestrated glory. Thousands of white roses lined the aisle. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the crowd. The string quartet played something classical and elegant. And there, in the front row, sat Elena Whitmore, her smile sharp as a blade. Alexander walked Madison down the aisle, playing the devoted groom who couldn't wait for his bride's father, deceased, to give her away. Cameras flashed. Guests dabbed at their eyes. The officiant, a judge who owed his career to Elena's contributions, beamed at them both. Madison's eyes searched the crowd desperately. There, aged Diana Woods, dressed as a guest, her hand near her concealed weapon. And there, another face she recognized from FBI photos Sarah had once shown her. They were here, but would it be enough? "Dearly beloved," the judge began, his voice carrying through the vast space. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Alexander Whitmore and Madison Pierce." The ceremony proceeded like a dream or a nightmare. Madison heard herself responding to prompts, watched herself smile at appropriate moments, felt herself dying inside with each passing second. The judge spoke about love, commitment, trust, every word a mockery of the truth. Then came the moment she'd been dreading. "Before we proceed to the vows," the judge announced, "the couple has chosen to sign their marriage documents here, in front of all of you, as a symbol of their transparency and commitment." Elena stood, carrying a leather portfolio. "As the family matriarch, I have the honor of presenting these documents."
Yeah.
She opened the portfolio on the altar, revealing pages of dense legal text. To the audience, it must have looked like a touching gesture. In reality, Madison could see the trap laid out in black and white. Trust amendments, medical proxies, custody arrangements, all disguised in legal language that would take a team of lawyers to properly decode. "Just sign here, darling," Alexander murmured, offering her a Mont Blanc pen, "for our family's future." Madison took the pen, her hand trembling. The camera zoomed in, projecting her image on the massive screens around the ballroom. 500 guests held their breath, waiting for the romantic moment. Then she heard it, a subtle electronic hum. Tom had activated the system. Madison looked up at Alexander, the pen poised above the paper. "Before I sign, I have a question." Alexander's smile tightened. "Of course, my love. The fertility drugs you've been putting in my smoothies, are they safe for the baby?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alexander's mask slipped for just a moment before he recovered. You're confused, darling. Those are prenatal vitamins. The ones from your mother's pharmaceutical lab? The experimental ones? Elena stood sharply. This is inappropriate. But it was too late. Tom had triggered the override. Suddenly, the screens around the ballroom flickered to life with new footage. Alexander's voice boomed through the speakers. The pills are working perfectly, Mother. I started adding them to her morning smoothies just last week, exactly as you instructed. The crowd erupted. Phones appeared in every hand, recording the unfolding scandal. The live stream viewers, now numbering in the tens of thousands, watched in real time as Madison's trap sprung shut. But Elena wasn't finished. With surprising agility, she grabbed Madison's wrist. Sign the papers, now, or I'll make sure you never see that baby again. The ballroom descended into chaos. Guests stood from their chairs, phones raised, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. The wedding live stream viewer count climbed exponentially, 50,000, 75,000, 100,000 witnesses to Madison's nightmare. Elena's grip on Madison's wrist tightened, her manicured nails digging into skin. You stupid girl, she hissed, low enough that only Madison could hear. Do you think this changes anything? Half of these judges are in my pocket. The medical board owes me favors. Sign the papers or I'll have you declared incompetent before you leave this building. Alexander had gone pale, his perfect composure finally cracking. Mother, stop. Silence, Elena snapped, then louder, addressing the crowd with remarkable poise. My daughter-in-law is clearly experiencing prenatal anxiety. It's quite common. These delusions, they're not delusions, a voice called from the crowd. Jack Morrison stood up from his seat in the fifth row, his phone raised. I have emails, years of correspondence between Alexander and Elena planning this entire scheme. He pressed something on his phone, and suddenly his evidence was displaying on the screens, replacing the baby monitor footage. Email after email scrolled past. Subject, Madison Pierce assessment. She's perfect, orphaned, no family support system, successful enough to seem independent, but isolated enough to be vulnerable. Subject, genetic compatibility. Lab results confirm optimal genetic markers. Recommend proceeding with courtship phase. Subject, Jack Morrison assignment. He's agreed to initiate contact. 3-month timeline to establish trust. Madison felt her knees weaken as she read her life laid out like a clinical trial. Every moment, every emotion had been orchestrated. Victoria Sterling, who had been trying to slip out during the chaos, was blocked by FBI agents. Her drunken bravado evaporated as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. I want a lawyer, she shrieked. You are a lawyer, Agent Diana Woods said dryly, leading her away. But Elena maintained her grip on Madison, pulling her closer. You've destroyed my son's reputation for nothing. You think you've won? I've been planning this for 30 years. 30 years? Alexander's voice was strange, hollow. Elena turned to him, her smile maternal and terrifying. Since the day you were born, darling, every step of your life, every achievement, every relationship, all carefully orchestrated. Though I must admit, the fertility drugs I gave you as a child had an unfortunate side effect. The ballroom fell silent. Even the live stream comments stopped scrolling. Alexander's face went white. What are you talking about? You're sterile, my dear. Have been since puberty. The experimental growth hormones I developed, they made you tall, handsome, brilliant, but they also destroyed your ability to have children, a necessary sacrifice for perfection. Madison gasped. Then the baby is from a carefully selected donor, Elena said proudly. Superior genetics from my private bank. I couldn't leave something as important as my heir to chance, or to my son's damaged DNA. Alexander staggered backward. You're lying. Am I? When was the last time you had a fertility test, darling? Oh, that's right. I've been your doctor your entire life. Every test, every result filtered through me. The man who had controlled Madison's life for 2 years suddenly looked like a lost child. Everything was a lie? Not a lie, a design. You were my first experiment, Alexander, and largely successful despite the sterility. But Madison's child, my grandchild, will be perfect. Unencumbered by your flaws or her modest genetics, I selected the donor myself. An Olympic athlete with a doctorate in physics. The child will be extraordinary. Madison felt bile rise in her throat. You're insane. I'm a visionary. Do you know how many billionaires have come to me secretly, begging for designer children? This wedding, this child, it's proof of concept. Madison was just the incubator. FBI agents were moving through the crowd now, but Elena seemed oblivious. She was lost in her own genius, her grip on Madison loosening as she gestured grandly. The trust documents would have given me full control. I could have raised the child properly, without emotional interference, created the perfect heir to the Whitmore empire. There is no empire, Che, Alexander shouted suddenly. It's all built on lies, on murdered competitors, blackmailed officials, poisoned rivals, including Madison's father. The admission rang through the ballroom. Madison jerked free from Elena's grasp, stumbling backward. My father, he found out about the clinical trials, Alexander said, his voice broken. The children who died, the families paid off. He was going to expose everything. So mother had him eliminated, made it look like an accident. I found the records last month. Elena's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful. I'm done being your experiment. Alexander pulled something from his pocket, a small vial. You know what this is, Mother? Your latest memory drug, the one you've been testing on dementia patients. I've been putting it in your wine for 6 weeks. Elena's eyes widened in horror. You wouldn't. Every dinner, every toast, concentrated doses. How does it feel, Mother? Have you noticed the gaps, the forgotten names, the confusion? As if triggered by his words, Elena's expression shifted. For a moment, she looked lost, uncertain. What was I saying? The transformation was shocking. The woman who had orchestrated decades of manipulation suddenly looked fragile, confused. The effects are irreversible at this dosage, Alexander said coldly. Your own research confirmed that. Within 6 months, you won't remember any of this. Won't remember me. Elena reached for him, but her movement was uncoordinated. An FBI agent caught her as she stumbled. Alexander, why are there police at your wedding? Madison watched in horror as Elena's brilliant, terrible mind crumbled before her eyes. It was justice, perhaps, but it felt like watching someone burn alive. Agent Diana Woods approached the altar. Alexander Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and murder. Alexander didn't resist as they handcuffed him. He looked at Madison one last time. The baby really was supposed to be ours, he said quietly. Before I knew the truth, I thought maybe I could love you, but I don't know how. She never taught me how. As they led him away, Madison heard him tell the agents, I'll testify, everything. I have recordings, documents, 30 years of evidence. I want immunity. That's not our decision, Agent Woods replied. The ballroom was emptying now, guests fleeing the disaster. The live stream had captured everything. The revelations, the arrests, the complete destruction of the Whitmore dynasty. Madison stood alone at the altar, her wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume she could finally remove. Tom approached tentatively. Madison, are you okay? She looked at her friend, her colleague, one of the few people who had never betrayed her. The recording, you saved everything? Multiple backups, it's already viral. 20 million views and climbing. 20 million witnesses to her humiliation and her salvation. The aftermath came in waves. First, the medical team Elena had stationed outside rushed in, but they found their patient confused and disoriented, asking repeatedly why she was at a wedding. The FBI medical examiner confirmed what Alexander had claimed. Massive doses of experimental memory drugs, her own creation, turned against her. Madison sat in a quiet corner of what had been the bridal suite, now transformed into an FBI command center. Agent Diana Woods sat across from her, tablet in hand, taking her statement. We've been investigating Whitmore Pharmaceuticals for 3 years, Diana explained. Your father's research, the documents you sent Sarah 2 weeks ago, they were the missing pieces. But we never imagined this. The baby, Madison said quietly, her hand on her belly. If it's not Alexander's, we'll need to do a paternity test. But that's a legal matter for later. Right now, you're the victim here, Ms. Pierce. Victim. The word sat bitter on Madison's tongue. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jack Morrison stood there, escorted by an agent. He's been cooperative, the agent said. Provided significant evidence. Diana nodded and stepped out, leaving them alone. The silence stretched between them, years of lies filling the space. I know you hate me, Jack began. I don't hate you, Madison said tiredly. I nothing you. You're just another person who lied to me. I loved you. That part was real. Was it? Or was that just what you needed to believe to live with yourself? Jack flinched. I left because I couldn't continue the lie. That has to count for something. You left because you're a coward. You could have told me the truth, could have warned me. Instead, you let me walk into Alexander's trap. I tried. No, you ran, and now you want what? Forgiveness? Gratitude for finally doing the right thing? Jack pulled out a flash drive. I want to give you this. Every communication between Alexander and me, every payment, every instruction. But also, he paused, also the real research your father was doing, not just on Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, but on Elena specifically. Madison took the drive, its weight negligible but its contents heavy. Your father knew about the experiments on children. Elena's been doing this for decades. Alexander was her first success story, but there were dozens of failures. Children who died or were permanently damaged by her treatments. Your father had names, dates, everything. And they killed him for it. Yes, but he hid copies, smart man. It's all on that drive. Madison looked at the small device. Her father's legacy reduced to a few gigabytes of data. There's more, Jack continued. The fertility clinic Elena used. She doesn't just have one donor sample. She has hundreds. She's been building a genetic library, selling designer embryos to the highest bidders. The baby you're carrying, there might be dozens of genetic siblings out there. The room spun. Madison gripped the table. What? She called it the Prometheus Project, creating superior humans through selective breeding and genetic manipulation. Your baby was meant to be the flagship, the proof that her system worked. Get out, Madison whispered. Madison, get out! Jack left without another word. Madison sat alone, the flash drive burning in her palm. Everyone wanted to use her baby, Elena for her experiments, Alexander for his legacy, and now the FBI for their case. But this child was hers, not a project or evidence or a bargaining chip. Hers. Another knock. This time it was Tom, looking concerned. Madison, there's something you need to see. The live stream, it's not just viral, it's become something else. He showed her his phone. The hashtag had Madison Strong was trending globally. Women were sharing their own stories of betrayal, of manipulation, of survival. Support groups were forming. Lawyers were offering pro bono services to women in similar situations. You've become a symbol, Tom said gently. Madison laughed bitterly. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be a wife. Maybe, but look. He scrolled through the messages. Thousands of women saying you gave them courage. You turned your worst moment into something powerful. One message caught her eye. Watching you stand up at that altar gave me the strength to leave my abusive husband. You saved my life today. Then another. My mother-in-law has been controlling my pregnancy too. I'm getting a lawyer because of you. And another. You showed us we don't have to be silent. Madison read message after message, each one a life touched by her nightmare. Her humiliation had become their inspiration. Her pain, their power. The district attorney wants to meet, Diana Wood said, returning to the room. Alexander's agreed to full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing evidence on not just Elena, but the entire network of corrupted officials, judges, and medical professionals she's built over 3 decades. What about Elena? She's been placed in a secured medical facility. The irony is her mental deterioration means she'll likely never stand trial. Her own drug destroyed her ability to understand the charges against her. There was poetic justice in it, but Madison felt no satisfaction. Elena was broken, Alexander was turning state's evidence, and she was left with a baby whose father was a stranger from a catalog. What happens to the company? Madison asked. Diana smiled slightly. That's the interesting part. The trust documents you didn't sign? They had a reversal clause. If Elena becomes medically incompetent, control of her assets transfers to the mother of her grandchild. It was meant to ensure you never had power while she was alive. But now, Madison stared at her. You're saying I inherit everything? The pharmaceutical empire, the patents, the research facilities. All of it. Elena's lawyers confirmed it an hour ago. She was so confident in her plan that she never considered this possibility. 3 hours after the wedding that never was, Madison found herself in a boardroom she never expected to enter. The Whitmore Pharmaceuticals board of directors sat around a polished table, their faces ranging from hostile to terrified. They had all been complicit in Elena's schemes to varying degrees, and now their futures rested in the hands of the woman they'd helped to trap. Madison still wore her wedding dress, though she'd removed the veil and train. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The bride who'd survived their betrayal now held their fates. Ms. Pierce, the board chairman began nervously, we understand this has been a traumatic day. Stop, Madison's voice was steady. I've been drugged, manipulated, and nearly stripped of my rights. My father was murdered by this company. So let's skip the pleasantries. The room fell silent. According to the documents Diana Wood showed me, I now control 51% of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. Is that correct? The legal counsel nodded reluctantly. Elena's shares transferred to you as the mother of her grandchild per the trust structure she established. And the FBI investigation will likely result in criminal charges for several board members, the counsel admitted. But the company itself might survive if properly restructured. Madison looked around the table. These people had attended her engagement party, had smiled at her baby shower, had known what was planned for her. Everyone who knew about the Prometheus project, stand up. No one moved. Stand up or I'll let the FBI sort it out. Slowly, 6 of the 12 board members rose. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your shares will be liquidated to pay damages to the victims of Elena's experiments. One of them, an elderly man who'd been on the board for 20 years, protested. You can't just, I can and I am. Leave, now. As security removed them, Madison turned to the remaining board members. You 6 claim ignorance. Fine, prove it. We're opening every file, every trial, every experiment to federal investigation. Full cooperation. Anyone who objects can join the others. That will destroy the company, someone protested. The company destroyed my family. My father. Nearly destroyed me. So yes, if necessary, I'll burn it all down. Or, she paused, an idea forming. We rebuild it completely. Every drug Elena developed through illegal testing gets pulled. Every victim gets compensated. And going forward, we become something else entirely. What do you mean? The interim CEO asked. A pharmaceutical company that actually helps people. That does legitimate research. That doesn't murder whistleblowers or experiment on children. The financial losses will be offset by the patents for Elena's legitimate discoveries. I've seen the books. Even after settlements, there's enough to keep operating. But differently. Tom knocked and entered, looking uncomfortable among the suits. Madison, sorry to interrupt. The live stream situation, it's getting bigger. He showed her his tablet. The viewer count had passed 50 million. News outlets worldwide were covering the story, but more importantly, women's advocacy groups were mobilizing. Lawyers were preparing class action suits against other pharmaceutical companies suspected of similar practices. You've started something, Tom said. They're calling it the Madison movement. Madison looked at the screen, at the thousands of messages still pouring in. These women didn't know her, but they knew her pain. They knew what it felt like to be trapped, manipulated, used. Set up a press conference, she told Tom. 1 hour. Are you sure you've been through 1 hour? She turned back to the board. You have 45 minutes to decide. Either you're with me in rebuilding this company into something ethical, or you're out. No middle ground. As she left the boardroom, her phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Pierce, this is Dr. Patricia Stone from Mount Sinai. I'm a genetic counselor. I've been following your situation, and I need to warn you about something urgent regarding your pregnancy. Madison's blood chilled. What kind of warning? Can you come to the hospital immediately? This needs to be discussed in person. It's about the donor Elena selected. We've identified who it is, and there are complications you need to know about. Madison's hand went to her belly. After everything, was there something wrong with her baby? I'll be right there. She looked at Tom. Cancel the press conference. I need to get to Mount Sinai. Then what's wrong? I don't know, but I'm about to find out if Elena's final manipulation is still playing out. As she rushed from the building, still in her wedding dress, photographers swarmed. But Madison didn't stop. Whatever came next, whatever truth awaited her at the hospital, she would face it. She'd survived Elena's worst. She could survive this too. But the doctor's next words, delivered in the sterile quiet of a hospital consultation room, would shake her more than anything that had come before. The hospital consultation room was deliberately calming. Soft colors, comfortable chairs, tissues discreetly placed on every surface. Judge Patricia Stone sat across from Madison, a file thick with papers between them. First, let me assure you that your baby is healthy, Dr. Stone began, and Madison released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. But there are legal and ethical complications you need to understand. Tell me everything. Dr. Stone opened the file. When the news broke, I recognized the donor profile Elena described. Olympic athlete, doctorate in physics. Very specific combination. It matched a donor we flagged 3 years ago for unusual activity. She pulled out a photograph. A handsome man in his 30s, athletic build, intelligent eyes. Dr. Marcus Webb, Olympic swimmer, earned a physics doctorate from MIT, died in a car accident 18 months ago. Died? That's what his family was told. But Marcus came to us before his supposed death, concerned that someone was stalking him, taking his DNA without permission, hair from his gym, saliva from discarded coffee cups. He thought he was being paranoid. Madison's mind raced. Elena, we believe so, but here's where it gets complicated. Marcus didn't just donate. I did just donate once. He donated dozens of times over 5 years, all through different clinics Elena secretly owned. We've identified at least 43 children born from his donations. 43? All the wealthy families who went through exclusive fertility services, all believing they received anonymous donations. Your child has 43 half-siblings, Ms. Pierce, and their parents have no idea. Madison stared at the photograph. This stranger was her child's biological father, a man Elena had selected like choosing livestock for breeding. There's more, Dr. Stone continued. Marcus left behind a wife, dear Rebecca Webb. She's a civil rights attorney. When she learned about the unauthorized use of her husband's DNA after his death, she began investigating. She's here. She wants to meet you. Before Madison could respond, the door opened. A woman entered, mid-30s, professional, with eyes red from crying but spine straight with determination. Ms. Pierce, Rebecca Webb said, I'm sorry to ambush you like this, but when I saw the live stream, when I heard Elena describe the donor, I knew that was my Marcus she was talking about. Madison didn't know what to say. This woman's dead husband was her baby's father. The violation of it, the strange intimacy left her speechless. Rebecca sat down carefully. I've spent the last year investigating Elena's network. The car accident that killed Marcus. It wasn't an accident. He'd discovered what Elena was doing, was going to the authorities. She had him killed. Another murder. Another life Elena had destroyed. I have evidence, Rebecca continued. Files Marcus hid before he died. He'd infiltrated Elena's donor network, discovered the Prometheus Project. He knew about you, Madison. He knew about me? Rebecca pulled out a journal. Marcus's handwriting filled the pages. He was tracking all the pregnancies from his DNA. He felt responsible. He wanted to warn the mothers, but Elena got to him first. Your name is here. Circled. He wrote, wedding planned for May. Must warn her before it's too late. Madison read the entry, dated 2 weeks before Marcus's death. He tried to save her, the stranger whose DNA grew inside her. I want to help, Rebecca said. The other families, they deserve to know. Their children deserve to know they have siblings, and Elena's crimes against my husband, against you, against all of us, they need to be exposed fully. Tom knocked urgently. Madison, you need to see this. Alexander's giving a live interview from federal custody. He held up his phone. Alexander sat in an interrogation room, cameras rolling. I want to make something clear, Alexander was saying. Madison Pierce is innocent in all of this. She was a victim of my mother's experiments just as I was. The baby she carries, that child is innocent too. And I'm prepared to sign away any legal claim to that child. It's not biologically mine, and Madison deserves to raise it without any connection to the Whitmore name. The interviewer leaned forward. You're giving up all parental rights? I never had any. The child isn't mine. But more than that, Madison deserves freedom from this nightmare my mother created. I'm also transferring all my personal assets to a trust for the victims of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. I don't want the money. It's all blood money. Madison watched, trying to reconcile this broken man with the monster who drugged her just this morning. He's trying to reduce his sentence, Rebecca said cynically. Maybe, or maybe he's just broken enough to finally tell the truth. Dr. Stone cleared her throat. There's one more thing. The 43 children, we've been monitoring them. They're all exceptional. High intelligence, athletic ability, perfect health. Whatever Elena's methods were, however evil, she did succeed in one thing. These children are genetically advantaged. You're saying my baby will likely be extraordinary, but that comes with responsibility. These children will find each other eventually. In the age of day testing, it's inevitable. You need to be prepared for that. Madison felt the weight of it all. Her father's murder, Marcus's death, 43 children connected by a madman's experiment, and her own child at the center of it all. What do you want to do? Rebecca asked. We could file lawsuits, go after everyone involved, or we could do something else. What else is there? Rebecca leaned forward. We use Elena's network, but for good. Connect these families. Create support systems. Turn the Prometheus project into something positive. These children didn't ask to be experiments, but they exist now. We can either let them discover the truth in chaos, or we can control the narrative. Madison thought about the women reaching out to her online, the movement building around her story. She thought about her father who died trying to expose the truth. She thought about Marcus, who died trying to warn her. We tell them everything, Madison decided. All of it. The families deserve to know. The children, when they're old enough, deserve to know. No more lies, no more secrets. That's brave, Dr. Stone said, and dangerous. Some of these families are powerful. They might not want the truth exposed. Then they're no different from Elena, and I'm done being afraid of people like that. Her phone buzzed. Diana Woods. Madison, Elena's conscious and asking for you. The doctors say she has moments of clarity between the confusion. She says she needs to tell you something about your baby. Something only she knows. Madison looked at Rebecca, at Dr. Stone. Will you come with me? I don't want to face her alone. Both women nodded. As they traveled to the psychiatric facility, Madison thought about the wedding dress she still wore, now rumpled and stained with tears. She'd started the day as a bride. She would end it as something else entirely, a mother, a survivor, and the keeper of secrets that would reshape dozens of lives. The psychiatric facility was a far cry from the Manhattan penthouse where Elena Whitmore had ruled her empire. Sterile walls, locked doors, and the quiet hum of medical equipment replaced crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Elena sat in a wheelchair by the window, her silver hair unkempt, her designer clothes replaced by a hospital gown. When Madison entered with Rebecca and Dr. Stone, Elena's eyes flickered with recognition, then confusion. Madison, she said, her voice thin, you're wearing white. Is it your wedding day? The three women exchanged glances. The drugs had fractured Elena's temporal awareness. The wedding was today, Madison said carefully. Elena's face brightened with the sharp intelligence that occasionally broke through the fog. Ah, then you know. Good. Efficiency was always important. You said you had something to tell me about the baby. Elena's hand gestured vaguely. The baby, yes, my greatest work. Do you know what makes humans superior to animals, Madison? Consciousness, planning, generational planning. Animals live moment to moment. Humans can shape centuries. Her eyes cleared momentarily. I shaped you, selected you from dozens of candidates, your genetics, your psychology, your isolation. All perfect. To be your incubator. Elena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Incubator? No, dear. To be the mother, there's a difference. The child needs more than genes. It needs the right environment. Trauma makes us stronger. Your father's death, Jack's betrayal, Alexander's revelation, all calculated stressors to ensure you'd raise a fighter, not a princess. Madison felt sick. You planned all of it? Not planned, orchestrated, like a symphony, every note precisely timed. Elena's eyes drifted to Rebecca. Even bringing her here, the widow of the donor, another strong woman shaped by loss. The child will have a network of survivors as role models. But you're insane, Rebecca said. Am I? Or am I the only one thinking beyond tomorrow? Elena leaned forward. The climate is changing, resources dwindling, political systems failing. In 50 years, only the exceptional will survive. I've given you an exceptional child. Marcus figured it out, Rebecca said coldly. That's why you killed him. Elena's expression flickered, guilt, perhaps, or just confusion. Marcus was unfortunate, too ethical for his own good. Like Madison's father, they couldn't see the bigger picture. The bigger picture? Madison's voice rose. You murdered people. I removed obstacles. Every great advancement requires sacrifice. Penicillin was discovered by accident. Vaccines were tested on orphans. Progress is ugly, Madison, but the results justify. Nothing justifies what you did. Elena's clarity was fading again. What did I do? I can't. There was something important about the baby. Something I didn't tell Alexander. The women leaned in. The donor, Elena mumbled. Not just Marcus. I mixed the samples. Two fathers, genetically speaking. Marcus for intelligence and athleticism. But the other was for something else. What other? Dr. Stone demanded. Elena's eyes found Madison's. Your father. The room spun. Madison gripped the chair. That's impossible. He died 7 years ago. I took samples before he died from his medical exams. I knew I'd need them eventually. Elena smiled dreamily. The baby is part yours, part your father's, part Marcus's. A genetic triangle. My masterpiece. The first true designer human with DNA from 3 sources. Dr. Stone grabbed Elena's medical chart, scanning frantically. This is illegal, impossible. The technology... I invented the technology, Elena said simply. 20 years of secret research. The baby has 3 genetic parents, stable, healthy, and unique. The next step in human evolution. Madison felt her knees buckle. Rebecca caught her, guided her to a chair. You're lying, Madison whispered. Am I? Test the baby's DNA. You'll find markers from all 3 sources. I gave you a child connected to your past and future. Your father lives on in that baby, Madison. My gift to you. Your gift? You murdered him? Elena's face crumpled in confusion. Murdered who? I don't... Why are you wearing a wedding dress? Is Alexander here? The clarity was gone. Elena stared at them with vacant eyes, lost in the maze of her own destroyed mind. Dr. Stone was on her phone, speaking urgently to colleagues. We need comprehensive genetic testing. If she's telling the truth, it changes everything, Rebecca finished. The legal implications alone. Madison stood abruptly. Stop. Just stop. Everyone looked at her. I don't care about the legal implications. I don't care about the scientific breakthrough. I care about my baby, my child. Not Elena's experiment, not a masterpiece, not the next step in evolution. Just my baby. She turned to Elena, who was humming softly, lost in some memory. You wanted to create something extraordinary? You succeeded, but not how you planned. This child will be extraordinary because I'll raise them with love, with honesty, with everything you never gave Alexander. Elena looked up, a moment of recognition in her eyes. Alexander? My boy? Is he happy? No, Madison said simply. You destroyed his ability to be happy, but my child won't have that problem. As they left the facility, Dr. Stone was still processing the medical implications. If the 3-parent genetics is real, your child is literally the first of their kind. The media attention alone... No media, Madison said firmly. Not about this. The world knows enough. They know about Elena's crimes, about the 43 children, about the murders. But this stays private until my child is old enough to decide for themselves what to share. Rebecca nodded. Agreed. The two other families don't need to know this detail either. It would only complicate things. They stood in the parking lot, three women bound by the strangest of circumstances. What now? Rebecca asked. Madison looked down at her wedding dress, finally ready to shed it. Now I go home. I change out of this costume. I build a life for my child, and I make sure Elena's legacy dies with her, while my father's and Marcus's live on through love, not manipulation. And the company? Dr. Stone asked. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals? Becomes something else. A foundation, maybe, dedicated to ethical medical research and supporting families affected by genetic manipulation. Rebecca, would you help me run it? Rebecca smiled sadly. Marcus would have wanted that, yes. As Madison drove home, she felt the baby move. Strong movements, healthy and vital. Whatever genetic cocktail Elena had created, whatever unprecedented biology grew inside her, one thing was certain. This child would know love. Real love. Not the twisted approximation Elena had offered Alexander, but the fierce, protective, unconditional love of a mother who had walked through hell to protect them. 6 months had passed since the wedding that never was. Madison sat in what had once been Elena's office, now transformed into something warmer, more human. Gone were the cold, modern sculptures and intimidating portraits. In their place hung children's drawings from the families affected by the Prometheus Project, photos of the real people behind the genetic profiles, and a single picture of her father taken just before his death. Her belly had grown considerably, the baby due in just 3 weeks. Every ultrasound, every test showed a perfectly healthy child. Stone had confirmed Elena's claim. The genetic analysis showed 3 distinct DNA sources, an impossibility that had somehow become possible. But Madison had kept that secret, as promised. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Rebecca entered, carrying a thick folder. The last of the families have been notified, she said, sitting across from Madison. 43 conversations, 43 different reactions. Some angry, some grateful, most just confused. Any lawsuits? 3, but our legal team thinks they'll settle. The evidence against Elena is too damaging for anyone to want a public trial. Madison nodded, then winced as the baby kicked particularly hard. Active today? Rebecca asked, smiling. Always. Like they're ready to take on the world already. Rebecca's expression grew serious. There's something else. Alexander requested a meeting. Madison's hands stilled on her belly. She hadn't heard from Alexander since his arrest. He'd been sentenced to 5 years, reduced from 25 for his cooperation. His testimony had led to 17 additional arrests, dismantling Elena's entire network. Wait, Dane, he says he has information about your father. Something Elena hid that he only recently remembered. Madison considered. Every interaction with Alexander was a risk, a potential manipulation. But information about her father. When? Tomorrow. The federal facility has approved a supervised visit. The next day, Madison walked into the visitor's room at the minimum security prison where Alexander served his sentence. He looked different, thinner, older, his designer clothes replaced by prison gray, but his eyes were clearer than she'd ever seen them. You came, he said simply. You said you had information about my father. Alexander nodded. I've been going through therapy, real therapy, not mother's version. Recovering memories she suppressed. Your father, he didn't just investigate Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. He was building a case with a partner. Someone inside the company. Madison leaned forward. Who? Dr. Patricia Stone. The revelation hit Madison like a physical blow. Dr. Stone, who'd been helping her, who'd revealed the truth about Marcus, had known her father. She was junior staff then, Alexander continued. Your father recruited her to document Elena's experiments. When he died, she went underground, stayed quiet, but she kept all his files. Everything he gathered is hidden in her office at Mount Sinai. She's been waiting for the right moment to release it. Why didn't she tell me? Guilt, probably. Survivor's guilt. She lived, your father didn't. But Madison, there's more. Your father knew about you. Elena had marked you as a potential candidate years before. He was trying to protect you. His investigation was as much about saving you as exposing Elena. Madison felt tears threatening. Her father had died trying to protect her from a future he could see coming. There's a safety deposit box, Alexander said. Bank of New York, box 573. Your father left something for you. Dr. Stone has the key. Why are you telling me this? Alexander was quiet for a moment. Because I'm trying to learn how to be human. My therapist says it starts with truth, with making amends where possible. I can't undo what I did to you, but I can give you this. And what do you want in return? Nothing, that's the point. Mother never did anything without expecting something back. I'm trying to be different. He paused. When the baby's born, when they're old enough, will you tell them about me? What would I say? The truth, that their legal father was a broken man who did terrible things but who tried to change, that genetics doesn't determine destiny, that they can choose who they want to be. Madison stood to leave. I'll think about it. Madison and Alexander called as she reached the door. I did love you, or as close to love as I was capable of. It was real for me, even if everything else was a lie. She left without responding. Outside, Rebecca waited in the car. How was it? Madison told her about Dr. Stone, about the safety deposit box. Within an hour, they were at Mount Sinai, confronting the doctor who'd hidden her connection to Madison's father. Dr. Stone didn't deny it. She broke down crying, years of guilt pouring out. I was 24, she sobbed. Your father was brilliant, brave. He taught me everything about standing up to power. When he died, I was terrified. Elena had people everywhere. So I stayed quiet, stayed hidden, collected evidence for 7 years. When you appeared on the news, when I saw what Elena had done to you, I knew it was time. She handed Madison a key. He wanted you to have this when you were ready. I think you're ready now. The safety deposit box contained 3 things: a letter, a USB drive, and a small jewelry box. The letter was in her father's handwriting. My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, then Elena Whitmore has found you, and I have failed to stop her. I'm sorry, I tried to protect you without you knowing, to let you live a normal life. But Elena's reach is long and her patience infinite. The USB contains everything, every crime, every victim, every piece of evidence needed to destroy her empire. But more importantly, it contains the truth about who you are. You come from fighters, Madison. Your mother, who died bringing you into this world, was the strongest woman I knew. You have her courage. The ring in the box was hers. She wanted you to have it when you found true love. Not the manufactured kind Elena would offer, but real love, built on truth and trust. Be strong, my daughter. Be smart. And know that even in death, I am proud of you. All my love, Dad. Madison clutched the letter, tears flowing freely. Rebecca and Dr. Stone stood quietly, letting her grieve. Finally, Madison opened the jewelry box. Inside was a simple gold band with an inscription, Truth in Love, Strength in Truth. She slipped it onto her right hand, a reminder of parents who had loved her truly. What now? Dr. Stone asked. Madison stood, one hand on her belly, the other touching her mother's ring. Now we finish what my father started. We release everything. We tell the whole truth, and we make sure no other family goes through what mine did. As they left the bank, Madison felt the baby kick again. Soon, very soon, this child would enter a world made safer by sacrifice, truth, and love. Elena's genetic manipulation might have created their biology, but Madison would create their humanity. And that, more than any experimental enhancement, would be what made them truly extraordinary. The contractions started at 3 in the morning, exactly 1 week before Madison's due date. She'd been expecting them. The baby had been restless for days, as if eager to escape the womb and face the world Elena had tried to design for them. Rebecca drove her to the hospital, the same Mount Sinai where Dr. Stone worked. The media had been camped outside for weeks, waiting for this moment. The birth of the Prometheus baby, as some called it. The child at the center of the scandal that had reshaped American medical ethics. Do you want me to call anyone? Rebecca asked as they wheeled Madison to the private room they'd secured. Tom, Madison managed between contractions. And Jack. Rebecca raised an eyebrow but made the calls. Despite everything, Jack had proven himself in the months since the wedding, working tirelessly to expose other corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. He'd never asked for forgiveness again, never pushed for more than professional friendship, but he'd been there, steady and reliable. The labor was long, 18 hours of increasing intensity. Dr. Stone led the medical team, having become Madison's trusted physician despite their complicated history. As the hours passed, familiar faces appeared. Tom arrived with equipment to document the birth privately, away from media eyes. Jack stood guard outside, turning away anyone not pre-approved. Even Diana Wood stopped by, now a close friend after months of working together on the legal aftermath. "Any word from Alexander?" Diana asked during a brief break between contractions. "He sends letters," Madison said. "I don't read them, but I keep them. Maybe someday the baby will want to know." As the sun set on the second day, Madison's child finally decided to make their entrance. The delivery room fell silent as the baby's first cry pierced the air, strong, defiant, alive. "It's a girl," Dr. Stone announced, placing the infant on Madison's chest. Madison looked down at her daughter, their daughter, really. This child who carried her DNA, her father's brilliance, and Marcus Webb's strength. 3 genetic parents, an impossibility made real by a madwoman's ambition. But looking at her daughter's face, Madison saw none of that complexity. She saw only perfection in its simplest form, a new life, unmarked by the sins that had created her. "What will you name her?" Rebecca asked, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the child who carried her husband's DNA. Madison had thought about this for months. "Hope," she said finally. "Hope Catherine Pierce. Hope for the future. Catherine for my mother." In the following days, the media frenzy reached its peak. But Madison had learned to use attention as a tool. She gave one exclusive interview with a journalist her father had trusted, laying out her vision for the future. "Whitmore Pharmaceuticals is being dissolved," she announced. "In its place, we're establishing the Pierce Webb Foundation for Medical Ethics. Every patent, every profit will go towards supporting families affected by unethical medical practices and funding legitimate research with proper oversight." "What about the other Prometheus children?" the journalist asked. "We're creating a support network, not to treat them as experiments, but to ensure they have resources if they need them. They're not responsible for how they were conceived. They're just children who deserve normal lives." "And your daughter?" Madison looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "She'll grow up knowing the truth when she's ready, but more importantly, she'll grow up loved. That's all any child needs." The interview aired globally. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured into the foundation. Families came forward with their own stories of medical exploitation. And gradually, the narrative shifted from scandal to hope. 3 months after Hope's birth, Madison stood in the renovated offices of the Pierce Webb Foundation. The walls displayed photos of all 44 Prometheus children with their parents' permission. Not as experiments or victims, but as faces of the future. Diverse, bright, innocent. Rebecca worked beside her, having found purpose in protecting the rights of donor-conceived children. Dr. Stone ran the Medical Ethics Board, using her guilt as fuel for reform. Even Jack contributed, his investigative skills helping uncover other cases of medical malfeasance. Tom had become the foundation's media director, using his technical skills to share their story responsibly. "You've built something amazing from something terrible," he told Madison one afternoon. "We all did," Madison corrected. That's what Elena never understood. Real strength comes from connection, not control. A year passed. Hope grew into a curious, active toddler, meeting every developmental milestone with ease. Whether that was due to Elena's genetic manipulation or simply natural variation, Madison didn't care. She refused to have Hope tested beyond normal pediatric care. The child would be who she was meant to be, not what she was designed to be. Alexander continued writing from prison. Madison had finally read one letter on Hope's first birthday. "Madison, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I think about Hope every day. Not as the child I thought would be mine, but as the person she'll become despite everything. My therapist says I'm making progress. I'm learning what emotions actually feel like, not just how to mimic them. It's terrifying and wonderful. I've been tutoring other inmates in technology, teaching with no expectation of reward. Mother would be horrified. I think that means I'm doing something right. When I get out in 3 more years, I won't contact you unless you wish it. But I'm changing my name, leaving the country, starting over. The Whitmore line dies with me. Tell Hope when she's old enough that her legal father chose to become no one so she could become anyone. Alexander. Madison had tucked the letter away with the others. Someday Hope would read them and make her own decisions about the man who'd helped create her story, if not her biology. Elena died on a Tuesday, 15 months after the wedding. Her mind had deteriorated completely by the end. The brilliant scientist reduced to a confused elderly woman who couldn't remember her own name. Madison didn't attend the funeral. There wasn't one. Alexander had her cremated quietly, scattering the ashes at sea with no marker, no memorial. The Whitmore legacy ended with a whisper, not a bang. But life continued, richer and more complex than any Elena could have designed. The Pierce Webb Foundation grew into an international organization. The Prometheus children thrived in their various families, connected by a network of support, but not defined by their origins. Laws changed, inspired by Madison's story. Medical ethics boards gained real power. And hope grew, surrounded by a chosen family of survivors who'd turned their trauma into triumph. She learned to walk in the foundation offices, said her first words at a survivor support meeting, took her first steps toward a future unlimited by anyone's design but her own. 5 years after the wedding that never was, Madison stood in the same ballroom where her life had shattered. But tonight it hosted a different event, a fundraiser for families affected by medical exploitation. The room was full of survivors, advocates, doctors committed to ethical practice. Rebecca stood beside her, having become not just a colleague but a true friend. Dr. Stone worked the room, her guilt transformed into purpose. Tom managed the technical aspects with his usual quiet competence. Even Jack was there, now a respected investigative journalist who'd exposed dozens of medical scandals. "You did it," Rebecca said, watching the crowd. "You took Elena's nightmare and turned it into something beautiful." Madison shook her head. "We did it. All of us. That's what Elena never understood. Real power comes from lifting others up, not controlling them." Hope ran through the crowd, now 5 years old, bright and curious and wonderfully normal. She paused at Madison's side, tugging on her dress. "Mama, why are all these people here?" Madison knelt down to Hope's level. "They're here because sometimes bad things happen, but when people work together, they can make good things from them. And like what? Like families, like you." Hope considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. "Was I a bad thing that became good?" "No, sweetheart. You were never bad. You were always good. You were always perfect. Some people just had to learn that perfection isn't about control. It's about love." Hope nodded, satisfied, and ran off to play with other children. Madison watched her go, this miracle child who'd been intended as an experiment but had become so much more. The band began to play, the same orchestra from that fatal wedding, hired deliberately. But tonight the music celebrated survival, not deception. Couple began to dance, survivors with their supporters, families made stronger by truth. Madison felt a hand on her shoulder. Jack stood there, hesitant. "Would you like to dance?" he asked. "As friends, as survivors." Madison considered, then took his hand. They moved onto the floor, two people who'd been pawns in Elena's game now choosing their own steps. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if the wedding had gone through?" Jack asked. "Sometimes, but then I look at Hope, at all we've built, and I realize this is better. The truth is always better than a beautiful lie." As they danced, Madison caught sight of Hope again, now leading a group of children in some elaborate game. Her daughter, conceived in manipulation but raised in truth, created by science but nurtured by love. Elena had tried to design the future through control and calculation, but Madison had learned that the future couldn't be designed, only nurtured, one choice at a time, one truth at a time, one act of love at a time. The music swelled, the survivors danced, and Hope laughed, the sound bright and clear and undesigned, the most perfect thing in the room. If Madison's courage to stand up at that altar moved you even a fraction of how it moved those 20 million viewers, hit that subscribe button. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than any trap life sets for them, share this story. Drop a comment with what you would have done in Madison's place. I read every single one,